This is Pierre Sabak, and in this section we're going to be looking at a number of different issues such as ego. We're going to be looking at machines and what this actually means, this definition of a machine, and also we're going to look at the creation narratives in terms of where all this starts and the 0 point, and we're going to go into quantum physics. So again, it's going to be very in-depth, it's going to be very complex, but broken down for lay people so that this can be understood very simply. So I'll take it over to Oriana. Thank you very much, Oriana.
Thank you so much, Pierre.
Thank you.
So we'll continue with what we just left.
Yeah.
I realized I forgot a very important example to understand this mysterious emptiness, this empty full potential. This is an example that is taught traditionally in the Dzogchen teachings, those teachings which, if you don't have at least a serious number of years of deep meditation, you will be refused access to. And yet, it is already bits are on the net. These books, these tantras, these continuums are available to anyone on the internet who would simply know what to look for. So due to this, I'm not breaking any particular secret. I'm simply placing, let's say, bits I found here and there on the same table and leaving up to you to appreciate as much as you want. So this empty full potential, which like the light variator, the potential does not change. Our nature is fully there. We cannot be outside of our nature. We cannot be anywhere else. When we die, nature is there. In the end of the universe, the Big Crunch, nature is there. And a traditional example related to practice, because here it is not dry intellectual understanding. The point is being able to know how to do it, how to get there, because we want free. We want free from the suffering, the misery, the exploitation, and all the rest. How to actually self-empower ourselves through nature itself. So this example, let's say before the beginning of time, this empty full potential was a perfect piece of paper, all nice and flat. And then through this primordial ignorance, which is called co-emergent ignorance, co-emergent meaning as we define self-awareness, which is self-aware by nature, if it is not fully self-aware, then fully self-acknowledged, then something kind of splits or cracks, and the energy kind of crunches itself onto itself. This is the tendencies of grasping, clinging, through fear of the ego, which comes from the fact that our clarity, our luminosity of our experience, and our empty full potential seem to be distinguished from one another. That's how we perceive. Our clarity becomes perceived as objects of sensory field perceptions, and the potential, the nature, which by having lost its clarity, cannot fully self-acknowledge itself, because the two are actually one. So through habits and tendencies, many lifetimes of ego clinging, karma, and all the rest, the practice of meditation is simply doing this. And you try to simply rest in your nature, as we define yoga, nirjor, to be united with your natural state, meaning to be what we are, simply. We simply let ourselves rest deeply with the self-recognition, and it does that. So as you see, you can flatten it, but still it always comes up, and again, and again, and again. And evidently, after a certain amount of time, a piece of paper would be flat again. So this is a traditional example for this empty full potential. While we are clinging in a dualistic perception, the potential itself, the piece of paper, potentially remains unchanged. It is just a habit, a grasping, which creates duality, electromagnetism, and thus gravity, because the perspective of the observer is clinging on to the aspects and what is manifest, and has lost sight of his or her own nature. So that was a very important example I wanted to place. So we continue with the ego, this ego thing. What is it? So ego, in Sanskrit, atma, graha, dadzin, dhatu dzinpa in Tibetan, atma self, graha means to grasp, to cling. The word comes from there. To attach, because we're intuitively trying to find the energy of the 0 point, which is no effort, which is natural. So we attach, trying to find no speed in a circumstance that is actually technically not able to continue, because it is cracked, split, and one thing referring to another. Only the nature is free. So ego clinging, self-cherishing, is a natural self-preservation mode that we have to keep it together. Literally, our perception does not know, fully acknowledge our own potential, and if we didn't have a way of keeping it together, literally, we would be, technically, cuckoo basket, as it's called, because of not being able to keep it together. So it's not something negative or demonic, and yet you will find in many literature, in the tradition of the insiders, who talk to people of lesser capacity who cannot relate with the natural freedom, timeless freedom of self-awareness directly, because they do not have a high enough vibration, frequency, energy. And for that, may I remind you, think galaxy. Raise your vibration, you will think something going up. If you think in 3D, then think the galaxy. Where is all the high energy going on? It's in the center, right? So think in 3D. Raise your vibration means become more mature. How do you mature? Self-awareness, being self-aware by nature. When you become more self-aware, when you turn your gaze inwards, then your energy of your attention is brought back to awareness itself. This is what empowers you slowly, slowly. It won't be a sudden, brutal change, but with the time you will definitely see a huge difference and will gain more distance, more ability to not be caught into things. You keep a little bit of space, a bit of sovereignty, and more and more and more. You learn to deal with your perceptions in a more mature way. So, this ego, in the tradition in Vajrayana in particular, for those who are intelligent, but still not as much as it could be, ego will be described as the demon, the vampire, the bloodsucker. Chak tung in Tibetan, chak is blood, tung to drink. It means vampire and refers to the ego, which is literally drinking our vital force out of our heart. How is it doing so? Because simply, technically, remember, when we are in a torsion field where there's thermodynamics, think meteorology, well, in the 0 point, no energy is in question. But when you're on the outskirts, there's all this intense amount of energy. So keeping it together literally exhausts us. This is the problem of ego. If you could only think, what could I do with that energy that I'm using every day to keep it together in dealing with the full potential effortlessly? Like, to put things in a casual way, all day long you're busy with people you meet saying, oh, I'm like this, I'm not like this, and da-da-da. You reaffirm what you already know, so nothing is new. You're repeating useless things. And again, and again, and again, you have to redefine, reinstate, as if the fact that if you forgot to reaffirm how you are, as if you were going to lose yourself or something. This is how we can see directly how much energy we are putting into this ego clinging, and as we're going to see, there is no such thing. So it is simply a tremendous waste of energy which here would be more in your better interest to put into simply being yourself, into observing your own nature, which is much more fruitful and with less effort. So here we are talking, as in logistics management, we are optimizing the situation of energy, because in torsion physics, that's the heart of the subject, energy, and then what we can do with it. So our own ego requires effort, and outwards force, so it is literally exhausting. And e-force means to push out. So when you say, don't push it, you know, the expression, it means stop clinging. Because effort corrupts. Effort is what corrupts our nature. We are trying to make better again, or to find again that which timelessly has always been just what it was, and that we simply fail to acknowledge. So, ego clinging is a distortion, a twist into two. And remember the oneness. It is a part of ourselves putting another part of ourselves into perspective to experience something. But the one and the other are not different in nature. They are one and only thing. So it's a twist into, a distortion. And this is precisely what these guys, the Vatican and the psychotherapists, are doing their best to keep away from our knowledge, to keep us actually insane and unhealthy, because ego clinging is actually what is making us insane. The sanity is the point of origin, where things naturally are what they are, and our full energy blossoming fully. Self-radiance is what creates the body and all the elements. And there is no such thing other than sovereignty and freedom. Time is freedom, and you do whatever you decide. This is your free will, your interest, your future, your life, your love, your everything. And no one ever can take that away from you, because it's nature. So ego is really the major problem, and many Buddhist teachings will focus only on that and saying how bad it is, self-cherishing, the cause of all the suffering in the world, which is true, but don't forget to not stop grasping at it. It is not a thing in itself, just like darkness is not anything else than simply light in a restful mode. Likewise, ego, this twist in two, is simply because we do not have enough energy or knowledge, or both, to go back to our 0 point where we find peace, bliss, no suffering, and all the rest. So ego is actually the cause of gravity, as we're going to see in the phase on Genesis. When this starts, this is where electromagnetism starts, and thus creating the gravity of things. If the observer is in a state of non-clinging, non-grasping, like meditation on emptiness, then the observed object would not crystallize, and it is not matter. This is how these people highly realize they can pass through walls or through anything else, simply because the observer is not creating gravity. So there is no interaction. This is what we're going to see with Schrödinger's cat. He simply could not go far enough, for lacking, to know that the observer has two possibilities, not just one. One possibility that we know of is just one, but when you reintegrate the nature, you have another which is full freedom, no gravity, no effort, no suffering, and so forth. So the major method of meditation is what is known as to relax, let the energy go back in its natural self. And lots of people might be familiar with meditation as deep relaxation and things like that. So it is not simply to have a rest, it is relaxing with full awareness in our nature. And this requires a little bit of effort, so long as we're not well trained, because this, like any other military domain, for example, is a matter of training. Practice again and again and again. And like Milarepa's testament to his son-like disciple Gampopa, we saw the other time, he simply stood up and showed him the moon, which was as thick in the skin as the soles of the feet for people who walk on the ground, which meant, my son, practice makes perfect. That was his testament to Gampopa. So, ego is the strength of coherence of our perception. It is a natural intelligence of self-preservation, simply because we do not have the energy or knowledge to do any better. In the tradition of Don Juan, the Yaqui Indians and Castaneda, they refer to it as the assemblage point, which is very literal and quite correct, and fits absolutely. And this tradition was also acknowledged by Chögyam Trungpa, which I will say a few quotations from, including Dzogchen, and who totally acknowledges this tradition as being totally in the same line as some Buddhist schools. And they do give a lot of incredible information. For one practice, that is the main practice of emptiness, which they call the Art of Stalking. For those who know, this is a practice of emptiness itself. It is an art, a skill, that has to be trained again and again. If you do not get it right now, no problem. You can continue and continue looking, and by observing your nature, with now proper information, it will naturally come to you, because it's there. Nature is forever the thing that no one can corrupt or transform. Which is why they're trying to keep control of us, and by preventing us to have the information, because if we do, it's fun. It's freedom for everyone. So the strength of coherence of our perception. Now we know we do not need coherence, it is dualistic coherence. We need it because we are dualistic. But if we relax, you're not going to fall into a time-space anomaly. The earth is not going to crack open, you will disappear. If I don't think that I exist, to be or not to be is the last question you need to ask yourself. Because whether you think of it or not, you're still going to be, right? I didn't ask myself the question until now. It's not because I wasn't asking myself the question if I am or not, that I wasn't there. So this question is nonsense, is what am I? What is my nature? How much am I true to my nature? How much do I acknowledge my nature? And as you know, that is the actual meaning of the word quantum physics, as we're going to clarify later. So ego is like a tower of control. It is, in Tibetan, the word dadzin. Da means owner. It is ownership. Our energy is there, our perceptions, our emotions are there, which are the fundamental energy, but we own them. It's me, my quality, I am like this, I am like that. No, if you don't own it, the thing will still be there. And the only thing that won't be there is the suffering and the problems, because you don't cling to it, you let things be naturally. Ego is described as being like a slippery soap. Because when you try to observe it, when you turn your gaze inwards and you observe yourself, when you try to look, suddenly you won't see anything. Where has it gone? It's like disappeared in the middle of nowhere. And then, when you get distracted, it creeps back. So it has this character, this personality, so to speak, that it behaves like a slippery soap. So a practitioner should always keep in mind one thing: who is fooling who? And ask oneself, what is going on inside? You see there are stratums, and underlayers of these energies. We are aware of our conscious thoughts, more or less, most of us not even, but we're not even aware of the undercurrents which are happening all the time. With this meditation, you will become much more aware, and meditation is described at first as being like the experience of a torrential river. Suddenly you just observe your nature, how things go, and you feel, oh gosh, I've never had as many thoughts as now, I'm having more thoughts than before. Not at all, it's just that you're more aware of them, and so forth and so forth. Meditation gradually will be like a flowing river quietly, because you are more aware, and so things do not fool you as much, because you're simply aware of what's going on. That is how you take back your mastery over your being, which is energy, space, time, if it is perceived dualistically. So don't forget that it's like a slippery slope. It's very hard, and as a practitioner, it should be our only concern. If that is set free, then there's forever, no problem whatsoever. So, ego is like a tower of control. It's the ownership of self-generated and self-sustained energy of the universe, of the cosmos. You don't need to own that which is already yours. This understanding enables you to understand that since there is no duality, everything is already yours. You don't need to own it. This is mine, this is yours. It already is yours. Just as a passage, the energy doesn't exist as a thing. It is only manifestation of the potential. So you do not need to cling to something which is impermanent, which will change, because manifestation will change all the time. It's its nature. That's why it's called impermanent, and so forth. Another thing that must be said about ego, and this is not going to please a certain number of people, but must be said, it's going to be hard to take. Ego, if you see the words E-G-O, if the letter E, which can be a circle with a line in the middle, you take that, you put it afterwards, go, and it makes God, right? What is God? God is the definition of the ego. It is the narcissism. The very fact, if you posit God exists as something else and perfect and better, well then you have to exist. Your ego is safe. That is why people who need to believe in a God that would be outside of them, something else, better, unattainable, like the Christians will make you believe that it is the ultimate blaspheme and to consider oneself the equal of God, and this kind of notion. Don't forget who is talking, because it is precisely the opposite. This is how they keep all of you in prison. Because if God exists, I must exist. If God doesn't do that, there's no question, right? That is called psychology, NLP, and this is how they are fucking you over. Sorry for the term, but it's not nice what they're doing for you. To you, sorry, for your worst intention, benefit against you, meaning. So if you feel the need to believe that God is better and outside and forever ungraspable, it is right there and then the very definition of narcissism. You are projecting, because it's still you in your own context, projecting the fact that there would be a God somewhere. Forever it is your thought. And this is the definition of narcissism. You project an image, and then you fall in love with your image. Oh, I'm a good Christian, I go to church, and I believe in God. And you wear the poor guy, Jesus, who is completely like this, in blood. Who did that? Yeah? So one of the first acts at the end of the talk, I have also a plan for action, because this is not about just information, what to do. I have a certain number of suggestions. The first thing I would invite you people, take the man off his cross, give him a nice lotus seat with the sun and moon, cushion, and a cup of tea, something. This is abominable. But remains that he is simply another being. We are all in this oneness, we have the full potential. No one is more godlike than any other. It is just a matter of how much every one of us individually know our own potential and use it or not. It's called free will. You are potentially everything, but it remains timelessly your free will to use it or not. Free will is naturally free, but it also means that freedom must be willed. This is called the intention, as we're going to see a little further. The map and the compass, both are vital. They're the only two things we really need. So this tower of control, that is ownership, this is the principle of tower of control. How do the military work? How do the governments work? By controlling centrally. So if you're like me, the first thing you do when you hear or you see a tower of control, C4, you blow it up. And then we talk. Because here, no one controls anyone. It is called self-sovereignty, self-responsibility, free will. You do what you like, as we're going to see, thanks to the law of one and Ra, as they will confirm it more than anyone else. Love is the energy of the prime photon. So your love is yours and belongs to you. And no one ever should have the power to even try to take that away from you. But if you don't know it yourself, if you don't use it, it is natural also that someone will come by and say, oh, I will exploit it. So this is how self-responsibility is very indispensable for the sake of everyone. So again, as the first Mohammedan teacher I was studying under, learning under, there is no suffering, only a sufferer. And this thing about compassion, why people hesitate in really giving open field to their own compassion. Because there's this thing called compassion hurts. I think we may all resonate to that, especially those of us who have a more natural tendency to it. It's terrible. Well, now we can know, what is it that hurts? Is it really the compassion that hurts? Or is it rather the ego? Because it is only that. This is how we can show that compassion, this natural energy of source awareness, if you want to call it that, is the best antidote to ego. That is why, as you know, the Buddhist tradition and insiders, they're very fond of these notions of compassion. It's because it's the most powerful tool to get rid of ego. It is an intelligence thing. It's not just, we're nice people. Okay, that is very naive and very simplistic. So, ego, those who believe in God, they are big, fat, effing narcissists, in my terms. And this can be shocking, but in a way, it is what is resumed too. The projector projects something and falls in love with it. It's the very definition. You do not need to believe in something that is better than your nature. Nature is timelessly perfect, timelessly free, and is the full potential of everything. So, it is, and we need enough energy to be able to relate to ourselves in this way, because of all the trauma and the things that make us have all this lack of self-confidence. All of us, that's one of our main problems, lack of self-confidence, in so many ways. And it is naturally so, everything they're doing to us. So here, taking back your decision, what is mine, nature is mine, I need to take it back and to act upon it. And knowing about ego is really indispensable. Ego is a focalization, back in the torsion field situation, it's a focalized limit. And it is, this energy that we are is only limit in the 0 point. What is the 0 point? This is a term for mathematicians and physicists. For lay people, 0 point, yeah, it sounds fancy. It refers to the fact that there is no electricity, no magnetism implied. I'm going to show it. This is an extract from one of the latest videos of Dr. Elias Lakisevich and Tim Sanders from Oriana, who are doing great work. And amongst other torsion physicists, we're going to see later, the 0 point is defined as the still magnetic point, the still electrical potential, aligned with geometric center, interconnected magnetic points is the God field or source, because it births all life, and it has awareness. Okay? But to define the word, 0 point means zero electricity, zero magnetism. It's easy to understand that in the outskirts there's all these vectors of forces you could represent. And this singular, unique point, electricity plus or minus, no. Magnetism, no. So you could call it simply the point of stillness, because that's what it is. It refers to that. The point of stillness, when your energies, your source energies, naturally flow properly. And of course, how could that be otherwise than through the heart center? So, ego, in another way, this great Mohammedan teacher I followed for a long time and learnt meditation with at first, that was more than 25 years ago, he always described ego's world as being like this. It was his way of saying that. It is just completely playing the flute. Ego wants this, like a child throwing a tantrum. So one has to become familiar that this aspect of a personality is deluded, is wrong, because in factuality, there's no such thing. For that, I would please ask everyone to explain to me why, in all the secret space program disclosures, higher ETs, people who channel and download, we've heard so many things, but never, ever, ever have I ever heard of anyone who has caught an ego in a cage, who's able to dissect an ego. What does it look like? And what is the fundamental particle of the ego? Well, maybe because there never was such a thing. This explaining that. Another example that I would like to give you Oh yeah, just to mention here, a very famous practice relating to help oneself of seeing how illusory this ego clinging thing is called the practice of Chu, which means to cut. It's cutting the ego clinging. But it's very famous in the West because you play music with a flute that is made from a thigh bone of a 16-year-old virgin with particular characteristics. You play music with a drum that is made of 2 skulls of 2 8-year-old twin boys, and so forth. So a certain number of questions could be raised here. Simply, originally, they happened to die, and then you could use the bone. So no murder is implied. But of course, traditionally, they will use something which is of course not that, which symbolizes that. The number 16 of emptiness, 2 times 8, and so forth. It is just math in the end. But ritually, there are these objects, and the chanting is beautiful, and it's very famous, so people love that practice. It's very famous. But the principle is here, you visualize yourself as a wisdom ducky, and you project yourself, eject your consciousness, which you visualize as this out, and this wisdom deity takes a sharp knife and cuts your own body in pieces, and in a huge skull, all the bits in the middle. Then you do certain visualizations with the primordial syllables of the elements, and with the body, speech, and mind, with the Father, Holy Spirit, and Spirit and Son syllables, and you actually transform the situation. And then you realize simply that grasping to this body as being really the center of you is totally nonsense. I would like at this point to give a more practical example. Look, Pierre, if you were to ask me right now, look, I really would like a piece of your body. How would I react? I would say, look, no way, that's not going to happen. Why? You would ask why. Well, because it's mine. This is my body, thank you very much, you have your own, So, why would I refuse? Because this is mine, I conceive of this as myself, really. And if you ask me, oh look, please, just a piece, a finger, something, no, it's mine. The ego considers mine. Then let me put this to your consideration. Okay? Now, if you were to ask me, oh, I really want a piece of your body, have it, I don't care. And then I ask myself, is my ego diminished? Do I feel right now diminished? Well, honestly, not at all. It's still completely there. I feel completely myself, thank you. So, where on earth is the ego? Because it's a piece of nail, but by implication, it could be that much, it could be that much, that much. Where's the body left? Where is the ego? My goodness, it's nowhere, it's gone. So with this simple example, you can see that it is a clinging. Ego is not a thing, does not exist. It is called Atma Graha. Dhatu Dzinpa. Grasping as there being something which actually was never there. So one can use these little examples, and the fact that we're repeating all the time, I'm like this, I'm not like that, oh, I'm like this, like this. This is so utterly exhausting. There's something better to do with that energy. So this ego thing is really very important. It is ownership of what? Of one's objects of sensory field perceptions, as we're going to see in the explanation of Genesis, and what our psychophysical constituents are made of. I will show again last time what I showed from Egypt, how they represent this thing. So here in the diagram with the numbers that they add, we have sight, smell and sound, taste and touch, and the 6th one on top represents thought. We have 6 senses, 5 senses, outer senses, and this is with the organ of which is the brain, just like the eye is the organ for sight and the ear for hearing. Our brain is simply an organ of the senses, and ego is ownership of these 6 senses. When we own our thoughts, I think this, I think that, there is a problem, and it creates a problem. No, the thought occurred. The thought occurred. It didn't occur to me, it just occurred by itself. Did you intentionally produce a thought? No, it occurred by itself. So just stop owning what is yours is the path of meditation. The actual practice that you, of course, don't do simply when you're sitting, but all the time. This is the training, the ongoing training. And you will see that things happen naturally, perfectly, by themselves when you stop trying to modify, to interfere. This is the misunderstanding of the prime directive by the Galactic Federation of Light and all the others, that this non-interference principle, which is total bullshit. They are simply misusing a fundamental principle, which means stop interfering, meddling with nature itself. When you create a genetic program with all these beings in this solar system, of course you can intervene. This is total nonsense. But it's this group of beings, as you know, they're part of the map, who are just doing their own agenda. So again, these beings, we say the same thing to them as to those. They are not more sovereign than any one of us. We need to take back our full sovereignty, because it is nature, simply, and it is our choice, it is potential. So, there you go. Free will is the only thing that should decide. Another quotation I really want to put in, because it gives a very personal example. It's living stuff. The second meditation teacher, Mohammedan teacher, I was following and did the first pre-retreat under his guidance. At some point I was traveling with him and his wife in Bulgaria, and I had the opportunity to have a teacher, of course asking my personal questions. And I asked him at some point, what is my biggest default? What is my biggest fault? And he answered that you think you have one. So let's be honest, right then I thought, oh, maybe I'm good, maybe my meditation's good, I think I'm good. But then I had a doubt, and I thought, maybe that's not what he means, So the traffic was a bit dense and I couldn't ask again. But then when the situation clarified, I asked him again, of course, a different perspective, otherwise I'm going to get the same answer. And then he simply answered this, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. And then again, I wasn't sure. I thought I understood, but I wasn't exactly sure. And I quote again the answer. The answer is simply, who is wondering about the fact that you have a fault or not? That is ego itself. So this is to show you, like when you have this unconscious habit of saying, in my humble opinion, who is trying to be humble? This is the very proof. Someone who speaks in those words, it means that he has a big ego, but he doesn't know it himself. So this is something for practitioners to know in themselves, how this ego thing works. It's not a thing, it's a habit of thinking that we need to do better, otherwise we need to fidget to interfere with nature, which of course is not the case. So I've gone long enough. Yeah, ego is this thing that requires effort, that is sucking the life force out of our heart, literally. It's effort, which is why our best interest is not necessarily even to bother with those. They have their own black holes to deal with, but to deal with our own, meaning the singularity and what is going on in our own self. If you have self-mastery over that, then your power to act for others becomes illimited by the same token. Here we start, as I said, the fundamentals of getting the hell out of this hellish situation of existence, suffering, being exploited. We need the map and the compass, and these two things only are what we really need. When I went to Egypt last year with Professor Jacques Lemaire, who's the author of the extraordinary movie The Revelation of the Pyramids, which gives maths, which is, I have the book here to back up a certain number of maths with pi, phi, the cubit and the meter, which are all linked in one thing to our constants, to our ratios, which is important to use in our source equation in the second possibility. We first began with the place of Karnak. Karnak means the place of the beginning, and even before going into the big library, as I would call it, you have a wall with a neophyte, a young boy, and two adults over him with vases empowering him, and you are told you are empowered as a neophyte in knowledge and will. How on earth is will equated to the whole subject of knowledge? Well, precisely that. The knowledge is what gives you the map. You know now that yours is the singularity to where you've always belonged, which is the full potential, which is timelessly yours, which is quantumly linked to everything. You do not need to make quantum computers because you have one that would work perfectly, called the cabbage here, the brain, as we showed last time. But you simply don't know how to use it. This compass, what does it work on? The electromagnetic fields of the Earth, right? Electromagnetism, what did we say about the ego? This is only valid in a dualistic system, so this kind of compass cannot get you back to your singularity. It is a metaphoric compass and a metaphoric map, of course. Here, the compass to get back to 0 point is the place where there is no gravity, and this is what is called will. You can only wish yourself free, you can only want to be free, or you can let yourself be used and abused and exploited as much as you want, if you really want. But if you want freedom, This will, where does it come from? It comes from your nature itself that wants to go home. So it is the deepest intuition of our own innate full potential of wisdom. This is why people need to be self-empowered in knowledge. Of course, it's a bit indispensable, you need to know. And then that will not enough. The map alone will not get you there. The will is the only thing that can. And this, maybe I'm uniquely able to talk about it as much as I want, because as I will explain in my personal context, this is the only thing I had. And if I hadn't had that, there was nothing. Everything else was completely destroyed, and I survived uniquely because of having a will that simply would not take anything from anyone, as you will know. And since the age of 11-year-olds, I'm a cracked kid, and in the streets I'm surviving by myself, educating myself, and handling basically this whole world, and say everything what's going on, simply because of will. So, willpower, free will, we would call it intention. When we see the physical field etymology, that is all over our language, the intention is really what we need to go back to singularity. It is also determination, strength of will, to unfix things, to free things. The free will is the ultimate stand beyond which no one can go because of this. It is part of the nature of the photon, which, as we will see, as awareness, as we just saw, seen from Dr. Vaksevich, and we'll see shortly after too. But also because, as the Lord one says, it is because love is part of the nature. You can only want your happiness, because they are all in the fundamental thing. So now let's see a bit of Genesis. What happened at the beginning? What on earth did this come from? I shall quote two traditional texts here, one from the Mohammedan tradition, the other from the Dzogchen tradition, which are the top, the summit of what you call the tradition of the insiders. The one from the Dzogchen tradition, Kunzang Menlam, the prayer of Samantha Bhadra, the Ever Perfect, which is commonly known and is publicly translated on the internet. And the second one, Kyedzo Nedu, I think it might have been translated, but I'm not sure, by Jamgon Kongtrul the Great, a 19th century teacher who, if you read his life, it's as if he spent his whole life meditating, as if he spent his whole life authoring books. He's authored whole libraries, encyclopedias, and things like that. So he's a very important role in the tradition. And Kyedzo Nedu means the essential points of Utpatti and Sampanakrama, the two stages of meditation, of generation phase and completion phase of sadhana practice, which means drukta, which means method of accomplishment. So they are tools. The sadhanas are tools, the sadhaka is the practitioner. And the two phases, you train in what actually happens from the point of Genesis and in the dissolution, so that when these things occur, be it at night time, at death time, or at the end of one universe's time, you are trained in self-acknowledging in your nature and in how things work. So you are not taken by surprise, you know exactly what's going on, and you stay fully aware in your nature. In this case, non-conceptual awareness. That's the difficulty here. It is non-conceptual. And this you can only taste by yourself and discover slowly how it unfolds, and taste how your capacity of knowledge can be non-conceptual. We are used to considering we can only understand things in concepts in a dualistic way. Not at all. This is actually the problem. So these two texts will explain. In the Kunzang Menlam, it starts with a declaration. One ground, two paths, and their two respective results. The one ground is the ground of the empty full potential, nature. Two paths and their two respective results refers to at the beginning of time, Genesis. You have the choice. Either you fully recognize your self-nature. In this case, you don't need to talk about any words, but if you want to put words, you call it nirvana, which means cessation, coming to a stop, to a halt. It means standstill. It means the point of stillness. The second path refers to samsara, which means spinning wheel, spinning around, and through which can only occur through absence of recognition of one's own potential, called ignorance. So this is the two possibilities we have timelessly in every instant, and it is our choice, knowingly, preferably, to prefer one or the other. Then the Kyedzo Nedu explains a little further. In the beginning, people may be familiar with the awareness being emptiness and clarity. These two aspects. If you call it one thing, awareness, non-conceptual awareness, which is the one final thing. In two, emptiness, clarity. This is widely talked about. So let's say these are like two hands. For a moment there, I just wasn't there. One's own self-aware nature just fails to fully self-acknowledge itself, instant by instant. And because of this, then the clarity aspect, like a teenager who goes AWOL to go goodness knows where, has kind of slipped out, leaked out, so to speak, is in the perception. And then it becomes objects of our sensory field perceptions, these six senses, sight, sound, etc., and thinking. And this emptiness aspect is just suddenly, where am I, what am I, and becomes scared and kind of, I must be a me, and retracts on itself and identifies itself as a self because of lacking the clarity, because it needs its own clarity, it is itself, right? This is how it generates. And then from then on, notions of me and my objects, of subject and object, and here there's a triple polarity, it's not duality, it's actually a tripolarity, subject, object, and action in between. These three are called the korsun, the triple polarity of action, subject, object, and act. And from this densifies, this I like, and then grasping, and it creates what is called karma, meaning a tendency. It's like this piece of paper is crumpling up. Karma is not something, it is a tendency of a potential that should otherwise be fully open, and that crunches up onto one aspect. It becomes determined in quantum physics, as we see. The thing becomes determined when you observe it, and when you don't observe it, it is undetermined. It is this very thing. So gradually, karma increases, karma and emotions, meaning this hatred and love, and in the sense of attached love, non-dualistic love, not the love of the love of nature. Love of nature is non-dualistic, it's non-conceptual, it's the energy in itself, it's not owned by anyone. There's no God who will decide these people are good, I will help them, I won't help those. Which is what people feel, people who believe in God, and if he were there, how can he even tolerate all the horrors that are happening? It's because of that, because there's no ownership, tower of control, there isn't a customer service of God who can say, knock, knock, look, I don't agree. There isn't such thing, unfortunately. It is also called nature. So gradually these things strengthen, and according to what we focus on most, if we're very angry, we get into war, strife, and conflicting with each other, we're very desirous, all these kind of things, or very ignorant, kind of stupid beings, or very proud, or very jealous. It leads into what is known as the sixth realm, which we saw last time with the map. And the sixth one, the ghost, corresponds to the so perceived as emotion of hunger and thirst. So you have 5+1 in this presentation. Although it is not properly to speak, hunger and thirst is not an emotion, but it moves them, it drives them in this context. So awareness is emptiness and clarity. So co-emergent ignorance, meaning co-emergent, at the very instant of every point which is actually doesn't move, in the 0 point, nothing moves. The point of stillness, electromagnetism equals 0, but time and space equals 0 too. No gravity. So this does not move, and this is what Tesla does not understand in saying that 9 is linear. 9 is actually the only thing in the center, because 1 + 8, that does not move, which is why he perceives it as linear, because he himself as an observer moves, which is why he's got some very good math. He just doesn't get the right finality. I will show that with the document that Tesla's work later. So the 0 point, or singularity, is the point of stillness where no forces apply. All equations are equal in being nil. It has a unique and singular math that denies all the rest in its own unique way. What is true for the math in the 0 point is totally not true in what manifests, and vice versa. And this is how you have quantum superposition and entanglement, because both are simultaneous and not exclusive. But this, you need proper maths to put it down. Not, of course, flat earth maths, of course, will not suffice for that one. So for a moment there, I just wasn't there. Moment by moment, we have this opportunity to self-acknowledge our nature, but we fall into kind of a daze or a haze, and this is how these guys can then do what they want. So 1 ground, 2 paths, 2 results. The ground is groundlessness, as is quoted in the Mahayana Shastra, which means the commentary, exegesis. Commentary is not the proper word. I missed the word. Treatise, that's the word. It's a treatise. Meaning not composed by Shakyamuni individually, because they classify differently the teachings taught by other people in their own unique context. So in this Mahayana, the greater vehicle, meaning the all-encompassing, the vehicle of service to others, it refers to the service to others tradition, where we go one, we go all, and so forth. And Uttara means unsurpassable, Tantra continuum. So it's the treatise of the service to others on the unsurpassable continuum. It's a major, major text for all the tradition of Mahayana schools, wherever they are. And this text will teach us that there are elements, right? Fire, water, stone, crystal, earth, and so forth. Well, fire is not an element. You have the element of earth that relies on the element of water, meaning it's the denser crystallization, densest you can get of the phenomenon. Okay, we're going to go back to the 0 point. Water is a liquid crystal, which is why it retains memory, the frog salamander experiment and so forth, just like crystal silicon are hard disk drives and the crystal skulls and all that, they retain information. Then liquid crystal becomes air. It is volatile crystal. So gas too has a capacity of retaining memory, but it's volatile, so we won't use it because of that. But it still does. And air relies on space. Space, this one, is an element. From the Big Bang, it arose, space and time arose at the same moment, right? Space is an element. It is the most volatile crystal, which is how space also has the capacity to retain memory, which we have the Akashic records and so forth. I will go with that in detail, but Akasha means space, and it refers to the element space, this one, not some kind of metaphysical space or something else. It refers to the space itself, which is, of course, in your awareness. This is not two. So when you access your awareness, you have access to everything, to the memory of everything, directly, all the time, as much as you would want. And what does space rely on? This is a major quoting from this important major text that all Mahayana schools know about. Space relies on nothing whatsoever. The empty full potential, whence it has come from. And if one asks, how does fire fit into this? Well, as we're going to clarify a little bit later, love being the energy of the prime photon, love is this energy, the heat, that makes one gradually more or less dense. So it is posited as an element to simplify things in a context where you refer to everything without giving detail. And in this sense, fire can be related to the elements because it has a role in one element being this or the other, being crystal, earth, water, liquid crystal, or gas, or space. So it is part of the elements, but it is not an element as such. And space, as the physicists know, space equals time. It's the same thing as in geology. Temperature and pressure are exactly the same thing in the effect. Space and time are exactly the same. So time is an element. It is not a fourth dimension. Remember with the alphabet, the Genesis from 0D opens up 1D, linear, 2D, polygonal, and 3D, 3D. There is no 4D. Time is an element. And it is born, it begins at the moment of, for a moment there I just wasn't there. Every thought that goes by, if we are in dualistic mode, it creates gravity, electromagnetism, and all the rest. Space and time. And if, moment by moment, you acknowledge fully your self-nature, like an enlightened being would, and so forth, you are not in gravity, there's zero gravity, you are not in space and time, you are not geolocalized, which we talked about last time with the map. This is why they can't be represented on the map. They're outside of the map, they can be anywhere. They could be in the room. How many teachers have I been with? This has been the passion of my whole life. Meeting these beings in person and seeing for myself. I would have endless stories, we would have no time for that. I will quote just a few. But it's beyond any explanation, even an image. Just meeting them in person. This is one of the major things in the conclusion of my talk. I'll just put it briefly here. But I'm so many years with them, so many years with you. I know both worlds. You guys, you need to talk. Okay, you really need to talk. You need to invite these teachers. Most of them, the younger generation, they speak English, and if they don't, there's always translators. If you need my help, I'd be happy to help. It's been what I've been doing as professionally for the last 25 years almost. So there's even a particular number which I know you would love to talk to, who are strong and who, in particular those who are very skilled in the rituals to chase those guys. That even the second to the Dalai Lama himself calls on that guy to do the rituals in his new monasteries and so forth, to chase all these things away. Those guys, you would just need an email, invite them, have an interview with the real Tibetan guys who know everything. You can ask them whatever you want. I would just need to precise to you that if you talk about 0 point and torsion physics, they might not understand, because the words simply do not exist in Tibetan. So I am putting this in a particular perspective, as I'll explain in my own context. I have both, so of course for me it's easy to put two and two together. But in Tibetan language, you won't have the terms, so the questions will need to be formulated in a precise way. But of course you can do that. It just takes to pay the plane ticket, an accommodation, and you would have these living teachers now, while they're still alive, kind of thing, before we get too screwed. So I'll just continue to get as far as I can to get to the interesting part in quantum physics. So now we can see the 5 phases of evolution. Okay, so once upon a time, but then for a moment there, I just wasn't there. And then clarity goes AWOL, what am I, where am I? The first form of life, this creates what is called a soul. A soul is a first generation structure, body, meaning crystallization. Crystallization with, of course, geometry, as David Wilcock and others show perfectly. How could it be anything else? So geometrical, yes, but a crystallization, okay? This is what is called a soul. A soul is the first generation body, the first generation structure. In other words, from Tibetan, Trukor, the first generation machine. Machine means system, Trukor, illusory kor, wheel, so it means cogwheel. It simply refers to a system where there are several elements working together. This is a biological machine, technically. We're going to see that a little bit later. So, this soul, as a first crystallization of these natural energies, there are also elements around that do not have complex crystallizations, the elements, and one can imbricate in the other. This is how a soul comes into a body. The body itself is lifeless, like a clone without soul. There are clones with souls and clones without. They are just a basic system, and that is why their awareness is not very bright. They can't. They don't have the proper machine imbricated into it. But they are basically basic systems that have a life more or less of their own. But anyway, in the whole process, the 5 steps of evolution, why do human beings say we are the final step of evolution? It is not wrong at all, but not just them. Any being who walks upright, that's the definition. The animals are those who walk bent, and because of that their energies can't flow properly, and self-awareness is not going to happen anytime soon because of that. Those who walk upright, they have a habit, meaning they can use it to self-acknowledge, ask themselves the question, where do I come from, where am I going? And then they look at themselves, meditation, and this is what I am. And then when you come face to face with your nature, me, good old me, long time no see. This is how it's described, the experiences you get in meditation. You recognize your true nature, not the superficial aspects that you focused on exclusively, for lack of knowing that you were something else. So the first step is called Zuk in Tibetan, Rupa in Sanskrit, form. I shall give a very silly example. Let's say, so this is the life form of amoeba, viruses, viri, this kind of thing. You see a circle, then you see a square, then you see a triangle. This is just perception of form. Nothing occurs in the perception of that form of evolution more than just a form like this, a form like that. Then the second step of evolution, Sorwa in Tibetan, Vedana in Sanskrit, means sensation. So you're a little ball, you're a mitochondria or something like that, let's say. So a circle, red circle, a square, a green square, a triangle, a yellow triangle. There's an additional step in the perception, a little bit more complex. Slowly, evolution takes its time, and then you get to Dushe, Samjna. Du, Sam means con in English, concept, concentration, 2 aspects together. We're full in duality here. It cannot happen on its own. Dushe, Samjna, this word jna, knowledge. So it is compounded knowledge, translated as perception. Okay, it's fully dual. So in this example, you're a more evolved a little bit form of life. A circle, red circle. I like red circles. And a square, a blue square. Ooh, we don't like blue squares. You have attachment, aversion, discharge in electricity, plus and minus. Attraction, repulsion. Then slowly, after many eons of evolution, you become an animal, for instance, and you have du-je. Against this du, samskara, skrit, which means to make, like Sanskrit means perfectly composed, perfectly made. So it's compounded language. Samskara means volition. Let's say a circle, red circle. Oh, I like red circle. I And then, oh, I'm going to get it. And then you jump and you get it. And then, oh, square, blue, oh, I don't like, and then you push it away or something. We can give this example with, for example, a lion in the savannah. He has a lioness, because they hunt, known to hunt with. And hasn't eaten for a while, just lying there, no animals, no gazelles. And then suddenly, movement. That's perception of form. And suddenly distinguishes legs moving. But it would be a gazelle or something, maybe interesting. It's a particular step in the discrimination. Then, the hunger. I want, you feel attracted towards that thing. It's not something, if it were another lion or another, another group would be a danger to you, the perception would be otherwise, but then you feel a wanting towards it. And then suddenly the decision, volition, I'm hungry, I go for it, and then just runs and catches. At this point, there is not the intellect. Understand, the cabbage, using the cabbage is not yet there. It could be, but it's not there. It does not occur. This is that step of evolution. Then we come finally to the fifth step, Namshe, in Tibetan, Vijnana, which is dualistic, fragmenting knowing, translated as consciousness. This is what all our consciousness is about. It is the dualistic version of the non-conceptual awareness, which is our nature. But here, you cannot do otherwise, because the clarity is split into objects. You think it's real in the real world, that we're really going somewhere, that you really exist, that time and space are real. This is consciousness. So in the example of the triangles, a circle, a red circle. Oh, I like red circles. Oh, I want it. Yeah, but I already bought 3 last week. Do I really need it? This capacity to reflect, very literally, to put things into perspective. This is why we have this cabbage, and it is just a cabbage as long as we do not use it. A cabbage, in a sense, is just an organ. Okay, just like the eyes, the ears, it's just that. Your brain is just that. The quality it has is that you can use it because you have it. And when you use it, you reflect on yourself, you ask yourself, what is my nature? Where do I come from? Where am I going? What is the nature of everything? What is the science of the explanation of everything? And this process itself is the final step, because you come back home. You will reflect and you will see that, it was my own clarity, my own emptiness all the time. There was no duality through the process of reflection. In the tradition, things are detailed greatly. The 6 parameters, the 6 perfections, the 6 things, qualities that lead you to the other shore. The other shore of what? The torsion field, leading the singularity, right? It gets you back to 0 point. Among these 6 qualities is the wisdom that leads beyond. Prajna paramita. I'm going to quote him a certain amount of times from perfection of wisdom that leads beyond, bringing back to the 0 point. So, for the explanation on these 5 steps of evolution, anyone who wants to have a further look, these are the texts that we studied with in the teachings. They are a text called Glimpses of Abhidharma. Abhidharma means Chu Ngempa in Tibetan. Chu is reality, Ngempa, made manifest. Reality made manifest. It is the explanation of these processes, these different steps of evolution. And when you reach the 5th one, consciousness, you can finally realize that in fact you haven't gone anywhere, your nature is still fully there, and then you come back to your nature by meditation, getting used to how we are. And this is the process of involution back. It is homecoming. This is how religion, homecoming, brings you back to the 0 point, to the point of origin. So, Glimpses of Abhidharma by Chogyam Trungpa is the fundamental text that most schools studies, which will explain all these forms, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness in detail, how they work. Oh, I just got it back. The 3 forms of prajna, of wisdom. The 3 forms of wisdom, of course, there's the map. Okay, knowledge is the map. There are 3 forms of the map, 3 levels. The first level is Shrutijnana. Understanding, wisdom of hearing, listening. It's to educate yourself, meaning to instruct, as we're going to see. The word educate is going to go from out the window. But to instruct oneself means to hear, to see videos, to listen. That is only one form of knowledge, and that will not set you free. It will just give you dry intellectual understanding. The second form of knowledge, much deeper than that one, is Sampeshira, the wisdom of thinking, of reflecting. When you think about what you heard, you reflect and you put 2 and 2 together and you try. This is even more powerful form of wisdom than instructing oneself and listening or hearing. You are reflecting by yourself. But that is not going to get you free, because at best you could understand quantum physics like this or that. It's not going to get you free. The only form of wisdom, which actually is one, is the wisdom of meditation. Meaning you check this out by yourself. This one, and you look, and you taste. And you take into taste, as you define meditation, you take into taste the fact of observing. And then you will check it out by yourself, and you will see for yourself. And something you've checked out for yourself, the rest of the people in the whole world could say, oh, you're crazy, or this or that. You would laugh in their face. So this is important to know these details, and for that, glimpses of Abhidharma. So the author of this book, which was an extraordinary Vidyadhara, Chogyam Trungpa, who came in USA many decades ago and who founded Vajradhara centers. You have the teachings on the four animals, the tiger, the dragon, the lion, and the Garuda, and Shambhala teachings. He's done extraordinary work. So this is the guy, and he's done a lot of interesting things, but he won't talk about Dzogchen, more the Mahamudra lineage, which is as profound, but a different aspect. So this is very interesting. So this is just to quote popular music. Lots of guys will probably relate. You know the famous song called Susie? Susie likes the boys and the boys like Susie. Might be familiar to a lot. I heard that lately and I was amazed because the guy understands more than most people do. He quotes, you have to see it, you have to taste it, you have to hear it, and so forth, the five senses. I thought, well, yeah, he actually sums them around. So this wisdom is in everywhere. I mean, this is a bit from my personal culture, meaning I've survived on ground level with people in the streets, and music is the only way I've survived. I would not have survived without music. So every music I listen, I hear words of wisdom everywhere, all of them, especially in thrash metal, which I will quote Megadeth quite a long time. But the deep wisdom is there, and what Megadeth says is not more or less right than Tesla. They're just missing the last bits. So here, the culture is totally multicultural. So to finish this quickly with the subject of the five conglomerates, this was only one aspect, to be short, because there's a lot, as you will see in the glimpses of Dharma and elsewhere, reality made manifest. We are made of five groups of three, or three groups of five psychophysical constituents. The Pung, Kam, Kyenshin, Ayatana, Dhatu, and Skanda, Dhatu, Ayatana. So the Pung, the five conglomerates, these five conglomerates sent levels of perception gradually, since we became a young soul, and gradually to get the full potential and then to go back. Then the Kam are the elements that we just mentioned before. We have earth, water, fire, all that in our body. And also the Kyenshin, which are these six senses, the eye in Egypt, which are, Kyenshin means the sensory fields in which our perceptions grow and flourish, grow and develop. So this is how we experience things. But these are not separate from our nature itself. They are further complex structures governed by electromagnetism, meaning by gravity because of ego clinging, that happen to structure out in all these manifold variety of complexities of ways which we see in biology and chemistry everywhere. The complexities are literally almost limitless. But basically, we are constituted of these three things. The aggregates, or conglomerates, because Pung means a pile, heaped up, these form, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness, the elements, and our sensory field. This is what defines us as a being. And now if you want, we can make a little pause before going into the machines and definition of things.
Great, well, thank you very much. That was a really interesting summary. And yeah, it's fantastic. This is one of those videos that you need to watch over and over again to really appreciate the subtlety about what you're actually talking about, and I'm finding it very fascinating. Can I just ask, in terms of the next section, will we be looking at artificial intelligence, or will we be looking at...
First, the definition of machines, generally speaking, beings, the elements. I'm going to go into detail with the words and how they fit. The God particle.
Right, okay.
And a few other things. Who came first, the chicken or the egg? Because we have the source equation in just that sentence.
Right. These are very profound, very interesting points. I'm going to be really looking forward to the final part of today's talk. I just want to remind the audience that we will be continuing this discussion. So please try and tune in on to my channel, Pierre Sabak. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.